Do you like conversation on a variety of topics? Feel like no one wants to talk about the things that interest you? Tired of only hearing the same political, sports, or catastrophe talk? Yeah, we feel that way too. Join two high-functioning geeks as they discuss just about anything under the sun. We can't tell you what we'll be talking about each week because we don't know where our brains will take us. It will be an interesting conversation though, so hang on and join us. Here comes the Relentless Geekery.
Stupid. I mean, it's not like I've not troubleshooted this before. It's not like I don't know where to check. It's just
right. So how could it be that we work in Zoom but don't work in Skype and don't work in Google Meetings? It shouldn't require a reboot between either browser level things or app level things.
Right. And I had a training session like a hour before this in Google Meet, and it was fine, absolutely fine. And now suddenly it's not working. It's so weird. Right. And I even rebooted. I mean, if I hadn't rebooted,
right.
Still, but so, for me, it's probably easy to test when Colin gets home. I could just hear, because we're in the same house. I'll set up a Skype meeting with him, and then I can call Gina's phone and I can test it until
that's okay.
Because we're all in the same house. That makes it a lot easier.
Right. You can yell down the hall versus Catherine's in a library in Painesville.
Right.
Whatever else. Okay.
Right. So, at least until we get those Microsoft AR goggles.
I just went to a big thing about T288, which is Apple's big project to make Apple Glass instead of Google Glass.
Huh?
And it's looking pretty cool. I am going to be one of those guys that's going to I already wear glasses anyway. They don't look so much like, obviously I'm recording everything you're doing, you know what I mean? And I'm looking forward to having augmented reality. I really am. I think it's going to be very cool.
Have you seen the promotional stuff that Microsoft's done for their HoloLens?
Some of it, yes. Not in particular for glasses. It was still big.
Yes. And
goggles, you know what I mean?
Right. And I mean, I liked it because the one that struck me was, it was this plumber with the glasses on, and there was a homeowner, and it's like middle of the night or whatever. And you could see the plumber grasp something. So the owner grasped it. So, think about that when you call a plumber out and it's like a 3-minute fix, and it's like, okay, that's $150 bill. And he just drove all that way. You could have a whole group of plumbers just on tech support calls and say, let me see. And they could see the problem and say, this is an easy fix. It's going to be $25 instead of $100. Yeah. And I'll walk you through it right now.
That's right.
I love that.
The practical aspects. It's not, we can have doctors operating from afar, which is still, you got to have a steady hand and some idea of what you're doing. But anybody can do lefty loosey, righty tighty if they know what thing they're loosening.
Right.
And that's what the plumber will be able to do. Right. So,
or even the problem we just had with all the people I work with. We are a virtual company, and we have so many people that are technophobes and hate using tech. And I'm like, why did we hire you? And
honestly,
it'd be so much easier, especially it's okay, calm down. Put the goggles on. I see your printer. Now press this button and, do this. I could walk them through it so much easier than trying to do it in my mind or pulling up a picture. I love it. That's amazing. So
before we continue further, let me call Catherine again.
Sorry. Yes.
I need to make sure that she knows that we're off for today.
We're screwedy.
Do we want to try again for 11:30 next Tuesday? Is that good for you?
Let's tell her tentative, and I will do some tonight troubleshooting with.
Okay. And I'm just checking my. So today is 3, and next week is still okay if we try to do the 11:30 instead of the 10. Okay. Yeah. All right. So let me.
Real quick, give her a call.
Okay.
Yeah, we know what we're doing. We're geeks. We're tech.
Awesome.
Hello?
Hi, Catherine. Alan Baltus here. So, no. Somehow we are not able to get sound correct from Steve's machine to where we know it'll be that we can both hear it and that we can capture the recording of it, because of course we both wanted to be interviewing you and doing it as a full podcast. So he was just on a training call that we think might have changed his settings in a way that he can't seem to retreat from, even though he tried rebooting and so forth. So he's got to do a little bit more troubleshooting. We've already talked through in desperation so many things we thought might work and try. None of the usual troubleshooting worked. So
sorry, Catherine.
He's now with me on Zoom on the computer, so he can hear me talking, and hopefully you could just hear what he said.
Yeah, I heard that.
Okay, please, I can't apologize deeply enough. If we can tentatively shoot for next Tuesday, if there's no progress on the troubleshooting, I'll let you know without you having had to go to the library or waiting for our call or anything. We should know within a day as to whether we're going to be able to fix this and get, like, we have not only you, but other people we can Skype with, like members of the family that will have some patience with us while we figure this out. And then we'll know that we'll be okay. So, boy, very sorry, but if we could do it in a week again, we really would appreciate it. Okay. I got.
Yeah, I'll be back here at 2 if you're ready then. If not, we're done next Tuesday.
Okay. I don't. Stephen, what's your conference by 2 o'clock? I think we need to get your.
I don't have anybody in the house to really test with, and I have another meeting at actually 2:30.
Okay. So no, 2 doesn't work for today, but I'll let you know as soon as we know, like tonight, as to, yes, we've got it working. We really have gotten out of this little pitfall that we've had, and we'll have confidence and we'll be able to work with you next week. Okay.
Okay.
Thanks, Catherine. Really appreciate it. Okay. Bye-bye.
Jeez.
Okay. Well, for that, really, I'm not, we don't necessarily want to include this in the Relentless Geekery podcast. And yet this is such a classic of, we really are alpha geeks. We really have troubleshot this kind of stuff so many times. You work with a virtual corporation.
Yeah.
You have done virtual support for how many websites and databases all these years. And yet once in a while, sunspot activity or something, things just go weird.
We've done this with 3 live events with multiple people. And, that went through, and that we were waiting for problems.
Exactly.
Honestly, I think what it's going to come down to is some security thing, because they have gotten so tight with security with all the systems and all the browsers. And I think just the fact that it was used, I don't know, but
I'll tell you, I guess the only thing, not the only thing, a big similar thing that I can think of is Colleen works from home. She also has all kinds of security things with her company, VPNs, not only control over her laptop, but access to her own files on the virtual server, access to her printer, et cetera, et cetera. And there's any number of times that it's not just been go out and come back in again. It's been like walking around the house, shutting off every device, kind of like waiting for it to cool down. You know what I mean? That's the only way to put it. But you make sure that when you start up, you boot it in the right sequence, and then it works again. But there's no reason that it should have stopped working.
I forgot to put on my skirt and do my dance in the sacrifice. That's the problem.
Honestly. And especially when, we present ourselves as geeks, when I'm usually the one that helps everybody else out. I'm on Zoom calls in my cinema. It's a thing that UHHS does for diabetes people. And regularly there's people that from time to time can't consistently get their mic, get the video, get everything working. And so I was like, check here, please check there. I've become virtual tech support, if you will. And then, but like when I have to do it to myself, it's like the advice I give everybody else and it's not working for me. This is hideous. Well,
but the good point is, we don't know everything. And I think that's important too, because with work, we've signed up with different systems like Stripe for taking payments. And there's, they have an API. You can create your own stuff to tie into Stripe and, do all this stuff. Well, they signed up for Stripe without me. They put in the stuff they need to connect it to a whole separate other system that we basically rent.
Right.
And neither of those two systems I work with and do anything with. Well, it wasn't working. So they call me. It's like, hey, can you look at this? I'm like, what do you want me to do? It's not magic. Just because I know computers doesn't mean I know every other system. And I don't have access to the servers. I don't have access to the code. So there are limits. And I think sometimes, because especially 20 years ago, people would have simple problems. Their keyboard was loose or something like that. And it was real easy to fix it. But they didn't understand it. So of course, any high level technology looks like magic to people that don't understand.
Exactly.
I've
had a couple of conversations with tech support from Colleen's work where it's like, we've got our house set up, so we have multiple environments and we need all of them to be able to work. I know that there's tunneling from VPN, but it should be that doesn't automatically knock everybody else off the network. And yet that's been the first suggestion multiple times is you have to get everybody else off. You can't have, like if I'm going AirPlay to the HP printer and that, they've had for a long time what's called ESP, external sensing protocol, where no matter what port you're coming in, no matter what Wi-Fi or Bluetooth or whatever you're coming in, it doesn't have collisions. It handles each of those as a separate channel, if you will, and that they take time. The printer driver is what makes sure that none of that happens. But they all retreat to when it really used to be that you had to take turns, and the people had to talk about whose turn it was instead of the machine figuring it out for them.
Right.
But it's like what they did. They figured that out. That's been a 20-year-old solution.
Right.
In the 2000s, it hasn't had to worry about that. But now somehow, because of the introduction of VPNs and various other security measures, they're too close to the metal, but they don't realize what they do when they do that. Oh well.
Poorly written programs. I mean, you probably remember back in the day on a small intranet getting like a network storm, and they're just sending hundreds of messages and everybody's machine bogs down. Exactly. And you're like, flip, everything goes off because something's misbehaving.
Yeah, I'll tell you, this is worth geeky talking about because the history of this is fun. I consulted to Ameritech for a long time, and the things I started off doing with them, kind of end user computing support services, was the group I worked with. What a horrible acronym, OICS, you know what I mean, however you pronounce that. Well, when they saw that I knew a lot, they would regularly have me help us shop for getting tape drives, help us figure out this network problem, help us get this print from a Lotus 123 spreadsheet. And we talked about this a little bit before. We had to embed printer control codes and stuff. Well, they had multiple network topologies, if you will, both physical and logical, running on their stuff. And it used to be Banyan Vines, remember that one, and Ethernet,
right,
and Apple Talk, that they all had different cabling. And if you could get things to work both, but they really did have to take turns, and you had to often reboot and stuff. And then already back then, this was, mid 80s, people were saying, hasn't somebody figured this out yet? We can't be the only people having this problem. If somebody showed me a little box that I put on my network that took all the traffic in and played traffic cop and made sure that this didn't happen anymore, I'd buy it. And I was always on the lookout for that kind of stuff. Some of it was solved by companies going out of business. I don't think Banyan's around anymore.
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
Yeah.
But what's funny is maybe VCR versus VHS versus Betamax, the better technology didn't necessarily win. You know what I mean?
It's better marketing.
And so, I don't know, Apple was one of the companies to first make it that it really was plug and play. You really could, with a network cable, attach multiple people to the network for the printer, and then that printer was not just yours anymore. It was a shared printer, and it did print queuing and all that stuff. And you might be able to, only a certain number of people could manipulate the print queue. They had a little separate program, a print manager, and so they made it so that most people didn't have to worry about anything. And a little bit of what you said, it is magic if you're the guy that has the program that can fix things and nobody else even has that program. They didn't know that and once you submitted the print, it was like, I'm waiting for it to come back. They didn't know that you could change priorities or you know what I mean?
Right.
It was.
So my first computer network job was I was doing data entry for an insurance company.
Okay.
And the manager spent 4 hours trying to set up an AB box. So one computer would be hooked up to 2 printers and you just hit the button with the printer you wanted. 4 hours, he couldn't get it. I walked over, looked at it. It was working in 20 minutes. And he's like, do you want a job?
Right.
So my kids, my family, people getting in nowadays, you don't know how easy it is to turn on a computer, connect to a router from anywhere in the house and get onto the internet.
Exactly.
They don't know the pain that people went through to get to this point.
Yeah. Wow. It's worth talking about. You and I have both done that. We were often like the guy that was called in when things were already bad, and then you had to kind of calm down. You didn't do anything wrong, but something is wrong. So walk me through what changed, who was the last one to touch it, et cetera, et cetera. I can't tell you how many times I had people like almost crying saying, thank God you're here, because I rescued files lost off of a hard drive.
Oh,
It was that month's presentation, and they just couldn't bear the thought of it's gone. And so, you know what I mean? When
right.
I used to have my little bag of tricks, my diskettes, and this is before thumb drives, where here was the thing that could analyze the hard drive, and if the directory was damaged, it could still look for individual files, and you'd bring up the file list, and they'd like point at this thing on the screen like a boom, that's it, that's what I need, oh my God. And it was very nice once in a while, especially because this was always like at 7:30 at night. We started working on it on 5 o'clock, and just
right.
to get to where, oh well. So I always liked doing that, and most people were appreciative. But there were, of course, also always the ones that were like, so can you make this that this never happens again? And that's just like, remember how when we started, I said I didn't want to like lay blame, but the reason that this stuff happens is you have to learn to save.
Yeah.
You have to learn to save multiple copies, maybe with a date stamp on the end, so you could distinguish between previous versions. You know what I mean?
We all know to take our car in to get the oil changed, to take it in and get it checked. They have lights to tell us when something's wrong and get it looked at. And we all know that to keep it running. And it's our fault if it doesn't,
Right.
But people with computers are like, oh, I don't want to mess with that. Oh, I don't want to, and it's like, but it's simple things. I mean, like I've learned through the years, and I think we talked about this before with my setup, that my C drive, I could turn my computer off right now, yank my C drive, stick in another drive, install Windows, and everything's there. I have to reinstall programs. Yes.
Right.
But I don't.
It is safe on an alternate drive. Exactly.
Yes, and the ones I love when there's problems are, hey, I've got a problem. Okay. Well, how long is it going to take to fix it? Well, what's the problem?
Exactly. I don't know. There's a whole bunch of talking people off the ledge. If anything went wrong, it must be a virus. And it was like, right. No, probably it's, there's a bunch of other things. And so let me test those things first. And I don't know, this is a whole cool discussion that I've actually had like sitting at the Mensa table, where one of the things you learn as a troubleshooter is like you attack the most common problems, the solutions to those problems first. You see what it might be, but it's not just starting at A. You kind of do the thing that here's the most probable, and maybe it's 3 things. Then if it's not any of those 3 things, the easy fixes but common ones, then you don't just start at A and go towards Z. You say, what can I test so that it cuts what it could be in half? Right. And so that way I'll get to a solution in kind of a binary search. You know what I mean? If I've got 100 things it might be, will it take 99 things to find it? No, it'll take, let's see, what's between 64 and 128, 2 to the 7th versus 2 to the 8th. I hope I have that right. It'll take 7 going on 8 to get, right, to figure out close to what's wrong in 7 tries, not 100 tries. That's a really powerful thing to be able to talk. And sometimes they want to know, well, how'd you figure that out? Well, it's kind of looking at the solution space, and that you try to cut it in half each time. And so, like I said, a binary search, and they would like, well, how do you even know that? Well, unfortunately, that's kind of a bit of experience as to, you have to know if it's not the easy stuff, then it isn't about finding what's wrong. It's about being able to find out what's not wrong. Right. It's not. And then keep narrowing what it might be.
And just the experience of, I've run into these 100 problems, and I know that this group of 15 is a hard drive type issue. This group of 20 is a driver issue. And you get that idea. But, if if it's the first time you've ever encountered that, you might have no clue.
Right.
And
there's also, boy, there was a whole bunch of frustration with, so the first thing I'm going to do is make a backup because we need to have a place to retreat to instead of my starting to fiddle around. I lose something and then, oh my God, that, no matter what, don't lose data. Well, how long is the backup going to take? Probably like an hour.
Right.
I don't have an hour. My friend, I'm sorry. You need to make whatever calls you need to tell somebody who's waiting on this.
Right.
These are fritzed up and you're going to have to, you can't count on it being a 5-minute thing. You got to first get safe and then start working on the solution. So
I read it was a report, whatever, somebody, they did a study, and that they found that the people that have the least problems with computers are the ones that fiddle with it, that go into the settings and click the settings and see how it changes things. But the people that are afraid to just even go into settings or to even change like the browser window size or something like that, the ones that are afraid to do that have more problems because everything is a major issue to them. That's and they don't know how to,
it's all scary.
Yeah. Exactly. My browser I can't see anything. It's too big now. Okay, we'll shrink it. I have no idea how to do that. So suddenly it's a problem, but you and I wouldn't even consider that a problem. It's like, okay, it's fixed and done. Forgot all about it.
Right.
So,
you know what, there's like a book to be written about this, that troubleshooting mindset. It isn't only about computers. It's kind of like, how do you view the world? Whenever we travel, like we in the days before you had a GPS that took you unerringly to your destination, it was usually, I have a map that's going to get me close, the course coordinates, and then I have some directions from the hotel that said, when you get off this exit, here's how to take this series of cuts to get to us. And that ability to go from course to find, to go from I'm going to get close, then it can only be so big a problem from there. You're within 2 blocks. If you just randomly search, you'll find it in a while. And if you don't, if you just stop somebody on the street, hey, do you know where Giano's is? Yes, I live here. You all these things, and that applies to travel, to how to find something in a library, to how to, like, all kinds of, how do you get enough information to make the big steps first and get close? And then there's a separate step. You stop thinking about big things. You start thinking of, now that I'm close, what are the things I want to ask to get to the finer solution, I guess.
Right.
So there's also, and you might have laughed about this, Myers-Briggs, there's a big thing between the ENT and then either P or J, perceiving or judging.
Right.
And people that do everything purposefully, I only want to learn this so that I can do this thing. They learn the method on how to do that thing. If you're a perceiver, you're always taking in information, and no matter what the problem is, I have a feel for what to do next. I might not know the perfect method to get there, but there's never a time that I feel lost. So sometimes when we play poker. The boys would play poker on the 3rd Friday of each night, and it was all over the Chicagoland area. Many's the time that I want to get there on time for the game, so I drive right to it. I use my mapping. On the way home, I just said, well, I know I live northwest of here, and I would just head either north or west. And then you kind of like, well, now this looks a little bit familiar. I've seen these train tracks on a map. If I cross them, then I know I'm in this place. You see a town name. I know where Carroll Stream is compared to Glen, all that kind of stuff. And then that's all kind of getting stored up here. And the next time that you get lost in any of those places, you're like, this seems kind of familiar. I'm pretty sure that there's like a gas station or a mall or something coming up. Oh, there it is, like I expected. And all of a sudden that anxiety is gone, because by having tootled around coming home from poker, now I have a feel for the area. And I had that for a lot of Chicago. I mean, it's places I probably shouldn't have gone, where it's like a neighborhood, or it's like, what am I doing here? But after a while, it's like, it was very handy. It was very handy to have expanded my map so that there was no place that people could tell me to go in Chicago where it would be, oh, isn't that near the Leaning Tower of Pisa replica where the YMCA? It's like, how do you know that? Well, I went by there one day and it's memorable.
Right.
Tower of Pisa everywhere.
Right. and that touches upon an even deeper thing. I mean, first of all, you have the confidence, and that's the same thing with doing the computer stuff. And that is something I think our kids are missing, and parents don't get with the kids, that you were driving around. Now, could you have failed? Could you have gotten completely lost? Yes, absolutely. But you really couldn't, because all you got to do is keep driving left, right, or something. I mean, if you drive north, you're going to hit a lake, and then
See,
you know
and
where
that's
you're
what
at.
it is. Luckily, exactly, in Chicago, if you keep going east, you'll hit the lake. In
Right.
Cleveland, it's just north instead of east, but there's
Right.
still a thing, I've gone now beyond this is terra incognita. I know I shouldn't go there. So then I start thinking, am I west or east of where I want to be?
Right.
Head that way.
And it's that mindset then that you get, that I can do this. There's a confidence that builds up by failing occasionally. But the problem is that our society is getting more and more built up to where kids don't fail at anything, that we don't want them to fail the Common Core, so we concentrate on that, and then they don't know history and reading. That parents, we don't want them to feel like failures, so everybody gets a participation trophy, and I don't want my kid to do that because he might fail, or I'm going to help him. This bugged me, like with the Cub Scouts. The parents would make the Pinewood Derby cars because I wanted to make sure it was done good so they wouldn't lose.
Yeah.
No,
That's been around forever.
Freaking lose.
Before the helicopter parent was a term,
Yes.
There already was the kind of interfering, over mothering,
Yes.
fathering parent, whatever. Yeah.
But you got to let the kids fail at times. Let them fail when they're 8 at the little things. They will learn so much more, and you'll learn a lot about the kid. They'll learn a lot about themselves, making a car. Yeah.
Exactly.
You'll get those kids that go, you know what? That car sucked last year and I lost. I'm doing much better this year. You have just helped that kid for the rest of his life much more than you would have by handing him a car that won.
Yeah.
But
boy, a perfect segue that we hadn't intended on talking about. Colleen and I are drinking in the Olympics.
Okay.
You see someone that's great at the Olympics. It isn't that they were like born being a great archer,
Right.
tumbler, pole vaulter. They had to fail how many? 100,000 times in order to get it to where now it's in muscle memory, and they can judge based on everything, the quality of the track, and how are they feeling that day, and who are my opponents. That they've got all that goes into a great performance. And in some cases, it seems effortless because they're so fluid and so perfect at what they do. But what built into that, you can't play a piano concerto until you've practiced it 1,000 times.
Right.
And the Olympics are so much a proof of that. When they show the backstories, sometimes very interesting, sometimes a little intrusive, or like, let's get back to seeing the sports, if you will. But almost all of them have that thing of, I was at the gym every day. Yeah. I knew people that I got there for 8 hours, and they were there when I got there, and they were still there when I left. So who do I think is going to do well? The people that are even more crazy dedicated than I am. You know what I mean? And maybe that's obsessive a little bit too. Once in a while, there's a little bit of, wow, you're getting a lot of your value in life from that. I hope that the lessons are not, I'm a good pole vaulter, but it's more like the lessons of, it took training to get that skill. It took persistence.
What I've learned and seen, it's not my original thought. If you want to be successful at something, life in general, but if computers is what we were talking about, hard troubleshooting, you have to have a passion and you have to have focus. If you don't have either one of those things, you're not going to be successful at whatever it is. I can play piano, but if I don't enjoy it, and if I'm not really pushing at it, I'm never going to get to that ultra level.
Exactly. It's one of the joys of having done a lot of investing over these last, say, 2.5 years is it was a return to a field that I had cared a lot about 20 years ago, and I had to put aside because I got bruised big time. But I love the fact that you really do get better at it the more you learn. You get better at distinguishing between noise and signal. You get better at, are my emotions involved, and how am I handling the right amount of risk reward trade-off, and all those things. But just in the overall, getting back to learning, getting back to, I can see I'm getting better. You know what I mean? There's no better feedback loop than, am I making or losing money?
Right.
You know what I mean? The reward is very immediate, or the lack of reward. And so I've done a number of things where I got really good at it. But when you get good, then it's not, you're not coasting. You're not just doing it mindlessly, but the expectation of victory is there. And you don't have that risk as high of, I really might fail big time. I might embarrass myself. I might really need to go to somebody and say, not only I don't have it working, I'm not sure I'm going to be able to figure this out. So much of becoming an adult is not wanting to embarrass yourself like that. And yet I love learning. Yeah. I love figuring things out. And like you said to the start of the conversation, just trying things. You sit down at a new computer and you browse the menus and you go into the preference dialogues and you try things. And that, like, so what would happen if I did this? A part of being a great QA person is not doing what's in the menus, not doing what everybody would expect. How can I futz with this in a way that a human being might do anything crazy random? How do I recreate that? And in fact, Microsoft even has a term called fuzzing for that. You throw data at a program, all kinds of input that nobody in their right mind would use. Well, there's a lot of people out there. There's a lot of people that right mind is not the right term, but randomness happens all the time. And that's, of course, how they've discovered all kinds of corner cases, all kinds of, it's something that nobody would do. And yet somebody did it and it broke the program spectacularly. Bear with me, I have to remember the name of this. There's the most simple text editor that comes with Windows from Windows Start was considered to be like impervious to harm. It had been so troubleshot and so many people had worked on it. I don't know, maybe called Teach Text or something, simple text. It was something like maybe Microsoft Edit. Well, someone found a way to broke it like at 30 years after people had thought this is the most mature piece of software we have. They found a way to break it because they just said, what if like I was a tentacled being and I really hit 8 keys at once? You know what I mean?
Right.
So I love reading about that kind of stuff of that our minds are in our programs. You know what I mean? That there really is that when you, and let me think how to say this. Of course, how we are with our computers is you can't figure out everything. It takes a certain amount of money to get to excellent. To get to perfect, it's like a near impossible amount of money. So you have to get a feel for what are the probability of something going wrong. How, if I tested for the top 100, the top 1,000, the top 10,000 things that might go wrong, and after a while, that number of standard deviations from what can be expected, it really isn't worth debugging it any further because the returns our diminishing returns are so small.
Right.
And yet there are some things like running a nuclear power plant that you kind of can't let anything go wrong.
Right.
So when they do what I read, the most fascinating things I read about QA, a little bit of maybe what we're doing with Raspberry Pi and Arduino, that you're going to put this in a chip. There's no like fixing it. Maybe nowadays there is with EEPROMs and things, you can actually change the silicon, if you will.
Right.
Way back when, the little mini controller that was going to go in, how does it, once you get that a car drives, not because you press an accelerator and it opens up more gas, but it actually goes to a mini processor and that's what talks to the gas and lets it, you have to make sure that that is just absolute, not fail ever, ever, ever. You know what I mean?
Right.
And I loved reading about there's that level of like crazy QA that you have to do for some things because you can't have someone's pacemaker go wrong. You can't have the gas pedal go wrong.
Right.
And those kinds of things.
Right. Which is why I don't want to deal in those fields. Too stressful.
That's really true. Any number what things we talk about, like no matter what, don't lose data. You know that once in a while you're just going to have to hang your head and say, I did everything just right. I played by the rules and something was still beyond what I ever would have expected.
Yeah.
So sorry, your Foxbase database is gone.
And they don't make Foxbase anymore, so we don't have a programmer to help you. You're just out of luck. Yeah, that's well. Speaking of all this computer stuff, I definitely want to talk to Catherine, but I've got a couple things to bring up that I think you find interesting. Right. So, I think I mentioned that Windows 11 is coming out. And they are really pushing the security hardware with Windows, that your hardware has to meet certain specs to be able to install Windows 11, or it won't even install. So I've got to upgrade. Okay, I'm good with that. Okay. Well, my laptop is extremely old. It's been slow. It's steady. It works. I can do just about everything I need, but it's a little slower, using it at times. I don't put very much on it. And I said, you know what? I can't upgrade it. It's at the end of its life. I don't have a lot on there. I'm going to put Linux on it. I went back to that. And I've been using Ubuntu most of the time. That's the one you hear about and stuff. And it's still like when I was setting up to do some programming, and I had to connect to a Git repository, and just everything I had to go through, all the steps to, I'm like, just so much work.
Right.
And that's
I
like,
thought I was free of this. I like having
Yes.
installers. I don't have to run an exact series of commands with 18 parameters that I can't get
Exactly.
wrong.
Right.
Okay.
And so I was looking around, and I've heard a lot about Linux Mint. So I said, okay, I'll give it a try. Let me tell you, I love Linux Mint.
I've never heard of it. Tell me about Linux Mint.
It's a branch of Ubuntu.
Okay.
But they have really focused on the user experience and making it so that your typical Windows and Apple people would feel comfortable, even more comfortable using it.
Okay.
And
it's on the drivers, it's got a GUI. It's all.
Yeah.
those
Now
things.
Ubuntu has that, but it still seems like whenever I'm using it, I'm still working a little harder than I want to. I
Okay.
still have to do a make and install and type too many commands.
Okay.
And the software repository, there's so many things I can't find. So I have to go to the website, and it's like, oh, look, download this, untar it. And, it's just,
Right.
I know how to do it. I just don't want to.
Right.
Linux Mint, the software repository was absolutely huge. Everything installed like a dream. It runs really well. I mean, with Windows, it was really boggy and running slow. My laptop, I Linux Mint, it boots up and runs and everything's zippy. And I'm like,
all fresh, no cruft, no
Yeah,
accumulation of.
it's great.
Okay.
And so I've been like, okay, I'm not going to use it as my main machine, but let's see what, if I want to go to the beach for a week, can I get to my email? Can I get to my editing and software development? Can I FTP out to the servers, or the whatever? It does everything. And in fact, I was even thinking of, what? I'm going to try it one of the days for the podcast. And I know my camera on the laptop's not that good, but I'm going to say, I'm going to see what this looks like and do it. So Linux Mint, I'm happy with, I'm playing with. So it's a new thing.
This is a terrible thing to say, but I'm really inspired. I have all kinds of old computers that are no longer my main boxes, and I really don't tend to sell them for $25.
Right.
You know what I mean? I tend to hold on to everything. So I've got the island of broken toys, kind of that Sargasso Sea of computers here. And it'd be very cool to take one of those and just say, let's see what can do with Linux Mint.
That's what I figured. So I'm actually now, of course, I can never stop there. I got to take everything to another level. Like, well, my stepson has an old laptop that the battery doesn't work well. As long as it's plugged in, it's okay, but it's not running great. I'm like, I wonder if we put Linux Mint on that, how good that would do. And, and then I'm thinking, well, you know what? There's a lot of laptops out there that can't run Windows really well, and they go for dirt cheap. Well, what if the schools actually bought these used laptops and put Linux Mint on them, and the kids could use it for the stuff at school? I'm like, that's a lot cheaper.
All you need is a spreadsheet and a word processor and that kind of stuff, so they can do their science homework, their essays and stuff. It doesn't take a lot of computing power to do that.
Right. And it's really no different than the Chromebooks that are out there. And that's what they use a lot of. And especially like Biomed, the tech school that my kids went to, that sounds like it would be a good project for tech, is to take the old laptops, install Linux, and use that for your schoolwork for a semester or something.
Exactly.
So
there's been people throughout the history of computing that have said that, what's the way, like Nicholas Negroponte, do you remember his name at all, from MIT?
No.
He was a real good visionary and explainer of like where the world of computing is going, kind of like bear with me. So his big project was, we need to get like $100 computer. We need to make something that every student in every school could afford, that we could sell them in Africa and Asia, that it's not this $3,000 rig or 15 or 1,000. Every one of those price points cuts off a part of the population that just can't afford it.
Right.
So he kept pushing for, don't only be thinking about how you can make things mightier. How do you make things that are all about power consumption, about the most bang for the buck? And when each time they had an upgrade, if you will, from the 286 to the 386 to 486 worlds and that kind of stuff, he'd say, don't just throw all those old processors away. If those things are now a penny for a CPU, but that still could be the heart of $100 computer.
Yeah.
Let's figure out how we can still manufacture that? A lot of it isn't only components, it's how do you mass produce that? He was like a continual, like, kind of a nag for the industry to say it isn't only about more pixels on the screen so you can play World of Warcraft. It is about making the information have-nots all become haves. And so hats off, I admired him for a long time with how he held everybody's feet to the fire about that. You know what I mean? That this isn't about being mightier. It's also about being inclusive. Very cool.
I have to look him up.
Mm-hmm.
So there you go. Give Linux Mint a try if you got a machine.
I know besides Ubuntu, I knew that there was Red Hat. There's a couple other distributions that were good reputations for different reasons. One's all about security. One's all about user support. One's about ease of install and that kind of stuff. And the one time that I played around with it, all I kept thinking was, I don't want to go back to the days of the overhead, all of what I have to do just to keep this updated. Right. And I was happy to have the relatively walled garden of Macintosh or Windows.
Right. Yeah, I agree. And so I think Linux Mint is a good in between, because I have used Ubuntu and I've got it. But again, I felt Raspberry Pi, I'm not getting that as a operating system that I'm doing my stuff on. That's for experimenting. That's
hobbyist and goofing off.
Yeah, programming and crap. But if I really want to use my laptop, there you go. It does. And it's not like I'm waiting forever. That was the big thing. My laptop's old. So I've probably got another couple years use of my laptop now out of it. So, when people like, oh, there's a lady at work, she's like, oh, I think I need a new laptop. I'm like, well, how old is it? Well, it's already 4 years old. I'm like, mine's 11 years old. Come on. But that also, if we do our conference in January, I'm just so looking forward to booting this up and waiting till somebody notices, like, what the heck are you running there? Because it doesn't look the same.
It's an old steam powered laptop that I use because it just keeps running.
Right. Yeah. So,
okay. You wanted to talk about the Perseids.
Yeah.
Look up, and so please, have you been outside? Have you sighted? What's your experience with this, and what's your?
Well, before we even go there, most people know about that. Every August they shoot. And if you haven't heard about it, well, you're probably not listening to us on the podcast.
It's the most plentiful meteor shower that occurs on a regular basis.
Yes.
Is that a way of saying it? Okay.
So here was my thinking. Of course, I was like being an idiot. I was like, okay, I've heard it pronounced two different ways. Now, they named it the way they named it because it's appears within the constellation of Perseus.
Exactly.
And I was like, okay, so if it's in the Perseus, then it would be probably Perseid. That is kind of the same how you say that. But every time I look at Perseus, all I think of is Zeus. So that would be Perseus. So this would be Perseid. So I'm like, there we go. We've had this conversation about our language and how to say things. And there's a good example. However you say it, I'm okay with.
I must admit, I've never looked it up. I think that I'm probably the first time that someone said it to me, I adopted it. So I heard it as Perseid, but I also know that I heard Halley's Comet for a long time, and it's not Halley's, it's Halley's Comet.
Halley's,
yeah. But now, if you correct anybody, they give you the look.
Yeah.
Like, what are you talking about?
Well, so my son loves to correct the two he loves to correct. It's not an orangutan, it's orangutan.
Okay, exactly. There's no G on the end. That's right.
Yeah.
And exactly. Old man of the forest, right? So, okay. Anyway.
And it's not Neanderthal, which we learned in school. It's Neanderthal.
Yeah. Even though there is an H in there, but you don't say it. That's exactly right. Okay.
But I also found out that's actually not completely true. It's more a regional thing. Americans typically say thal, but over in England, they typically say tall.
So interesting. Aluminum versus aluminium.
That's
we can get into. Exactly.
Yeah. So anyway, no, we have not. I mean, we were driving a couple times. I did go out and I haven't seen anything. I know it was rainy for the first couple. But
we were out last night and there were lots of stars in the sky, but we did not see any. We were only out for maybe half an hour. And this is late, like 11:30. One of those things where we had watched a whole bunch of Olympics and we kind of said, I don't want to just be a couch potato watching the Olympians with a BMI of 0. And you know what I mean? So we went for a bit of a walk, and yet maybe because there's too much subsidiary light pollution around Lakewood and stuff like that, I would think that if there was a shooting star, though, you would have seen it in this night sky because it seems
Yeah.
to be pretty clear. But apparently, it's like July 14 to August 14. You know, we're right in the middle of that period.
Right.
Last night we were not lucky. Maybe we need to go to more dark sky. Maybe we need to get lucky. I'm not sure. I would love to see them. I've only seen
Yeah.
them twice in my life, and I'm 60, so you really got to be lucky about no cloud cover. and
Yeah,
stuff.
they say, I mean, it's up to 10 an hour, but no guarantees,
Okay.
you know. So now this is something that I guess is changed a bit and new. When we were in school and we learned about our solar system, you know, we were with Galileo, sun's here and everything goes around it. It's not Earth centric. We know that much, but I never thought about it. But they always talked about how everything in the galaxies and universe is moving away from each other. But we never really talked about that in school. It was always, here's the sun, we go around it. But when you stop them, it's like, wait a second, that means the sun is moving and we're moving with it. So that means all these meteor showers that we pass through also are moving. So
Right.
at
And,
some,
and the plane of their orbits is just crossing our plane. So they're not also orbiting the sun. So it's
Right.
kind of like here's these two things that are, it's a big soup out there and
Yeah.
we just happen to cross each other. Okay.
Right. So I'm imagining at some point in time, we will probably no longer go through those and that'll change.
It might be. I mean, just that if we're not moving in tandem through space,
Right.
but we're moving kind of, less parallel and more across each other, yes, we should be out of range for where their orbit will penetrate our orbit.
Now
And
that could be
solar system
3,000
orbit, not
years.
even Earth, Earth around the sun is different than all the planets around the
Right.
sun. The solar system is a bigger disk, and it's not really a disk because there's perturbations. It's more of a cloud. You know what I mean? But at least
Right,
we're
right.
on the same plane.
Right.
It's actually, I love this stuff. When you first, like you said, when you start off with, I know that we orbit around the sun, but then the first time you see an orrery, it's where they have the representations and it shows that they don't all orbit at the same time. This one's
Right.
much faster. This one is slightly, it's elliptical. They're all elliptical, right? Instead of round. Elliptical versus, I think it's elliptical, right? And that they vary in, I gotta get my hands up here, they vary in the plane around the sun.
Right.
So that the reason we get closer and farther to various different planets and we can see them better is because that combination of doing this versus this, that exactly that slice of time is when they're close and they're in the right plane and all that kind of stuff.
Right. Right. And I think it'd be really interesting. And I know somebody's had to have figured this out. I've just never, it's not a common thing, but at some point we were closer to Alpha Centauri. We were closer to these other, and we've moved further away over the last 10,000, 20,000 million years. I would love to see some model simulation computer that shows here's where they are, that you could see the galaxies and how they move, but zoom in and get, those different perspectives. Because I can't wrap my head around it.
Yeah, it's I can't either, but when I've tried to get why would it be that we don't notice the change that much is because, as Douglas Adams would say, the universe is big. It's really big. And no matter how much we think we're expanding, if the universe is all expanding and whatever galactic center Big Bang start was, it's hard to know as those things move away from each other, how they're moving relative from each other, kind of like spokes on a bike, different ways.
Right.
Like this. But in comparison to the entire size of things, how much you're getting apart from each other over the course of galactic time, what's the sidereal time? I'm trying to think what the right term is. It's so our instruments are not sufficient for the amount of distance over the amount of time to say it's really changing.
Yes.
It really is that we're kind of like stuck in the amber of the universe in comparison, and that whole big bubble might be expanding, but relative to each other, we're still really the same over millions of years.
Yeah.
Hundreds of millions of years. I wish I had a better feel for the scale of that, really.
Yeah,
we know it's doing it because we can see from all the redshift and everything how things are indeed getting farther apart and not in a both going this way from each other.
Right.
Angle. It's
yeah.
Oh,
the thing that
the Planetarium show talks about that really well.
Yeah.
planetarium show at the Cleveland Museum of Natural History, any planetarium, I'm sure, has always a cool section of here's what the constellations are going to look like in a million years.
See, I love that.
They're changing. You know what I mean? And that's a
Yeah.
cool way of looking at it, that we, in our 10,000 years of intelligent life on the planet, even then, they might not be exactly what they were saying, but enough so that, and I don't know, when you look at the stars and you look at the constellations and you think like, what were they on that they said that's a snake
Right.
versus that one is a unicorn or whatever else.
Right. And
Some of them are not obvious.
right. And you got to think about that too, because we've got 10 stars in a constellation, but that's from our viewpoint. We see them almost as a flat plane because of the pictures.
Right.
But they're, some are back here, some are up here, and some are over there. And this one might be moving that way and that one. They're not all like moving in a group, because they're not.
Exactly.
When you think about that, then your mind starts to hurt.
Right,
the one
right.
that blew my mind was when they said, basically, with everything we know, we only can see and know like 42 billion light years away, I believe. That's like the limit. So what exists beyond 42 billion, we have no idea. And it's like, right. Oh my gosh, I never thought about that. There's stuff we don't even know about, Well,
but like from extrapolation, we know that there's not a wall, there's not an edge to the universe.
Not like Star Trek.
More the same, more clusters, and that if everything we've seen it's either a circle or a spiral or whatever, that there's just going to be many of those, but that the number of them is so large. If there's any way in which I try to get my mind around like awe and infinity, it's that the universe is really big.
Yeah,
you know what I mean? When we threw Hubble up there and we're able to start to get long views farther with clarity than we'd ever been able to see before, and what we just started discovering was more, that there's other cool, interesting things, class M planets or whatever you want to, but that the number of galaxies, the number of observable novas and black holes, or at least it seems to be a black hole, because there's a place where there's gravity is getting warped. There's gravity lensing, because there's got to be something there that we can't see that is making the light shift around it. I'm giving such idiot ways of explaining this. There's so many better elegant ways to put it that a real astrophysicist could do it. But I love reading about that kind of stuff, that like even at that scale, some things you can see it, or you can determine that it's there because of the effect that it's having on other things,
right?
What we understand of physics, you know what I mean? And especially going to the cosmology colloquium, that Mensa had a while back, like the biggest thing they say is, and even all that's 2%. Dark matter is 98% of the universe. It's there because we can tell from the physics models that we have that it's got to be what's really holding things together, has this effect on gravity and the fundamental forces and stuff like that, but it isn't in the visible spectrum. And so we're still just like getting so little information.
Yeah.
And yet it's amazing what we've been able to learn and apply and extrapolate to get to, here's the best map of the universe that we have.
Right.
And like a map of the universe. What a cool concept. There you go. Like it really is.
Well, I remember reading, I don't remember where I heard this, but they said, okay, so let's go with this, the multi-universe thing, which they've kind of, NASA even said, yeah, it exists, but we don't know much more about it other than, yeah, we know it's there. Okay, so instead of these universes that we can't see that are around us, let's say the multi-universe is that there's other universes farther than we can see, that they exist out there. Okay, so take our Milky Way galaxy. How many variations can you think of? How many different Als and Steves are there? Do they do a different podcast? Do we still have hair in an alternate? So, right there, so we've got 3 of them just right there. So take our Milky Way galaxy and duplicate it 3 times out there. And then think how many variations you have, and keep thinking of variations. And every variation is another Milky Way galaxy, but not solar system, the galaxy duplicated. Right. Now you start to, get an idea of how big things are.
One of the things that I've always loved learning about, let's say astrophysics, is that there really are forces that guide how all that is attracted or repelled and moving. And that as we come to understand them, we apply always the best science that we have. And then something happens like, okay, so what really happens near a black hole? What is the event horizon? And then you find out, well, that's okay, nothing can escape. So gravitationally intense that nothing, not light, not anything can get out. And then they see a flare of prions. I'm trying to think what it is that like does escape. And then someone has to explain that. Black body radiation coming out of a black hole. I think Stephen Hawking actually like made one of his big career making
Yeah,
was
that sounds right.
it's called Hawking's radiation. And so what are the conditions that would allow for somehow that intense gravity isn't exactly working on everything? So what energy do they have? What perturbation of how we think it works that we have to extrapolate? And then just like science is, you come up with a theory, and then how are you going to test it? Well, you observe as many of those as you can and see if where we think it's going to happen, like first you see that it explains what's going on, and then you try for the extrapolative power of, well, we think that this is a star that we should be seeing flares from, and behold, there they are. So that's the joy of science, is that you're not causing it, but you're starting to understand it. And then while you're doing that, something else funny happens. You know what I mean? And all of a sudden we're seeing two black holes collide into each other. And what is that doing to warp space-time around them? And can you predict it? You know, the fact that we're noticing it for the first time in an infinity of those, it must be happening, quotes, all the time, but we can only observe so many of them.
Right.
And I love, and not only at the big universal level, but all the things that we're doing with the CERN Collider and various others, where Richard Feynman has a great, I think a whole book, not even a great line, there's plenty of room at the bottom. When he first started talking about, the way that we have to deal with physics is not only that it's very big, but that it's also very small, and that at different theaters, maybe that's a good word, you get different forces that really have, they hold sway. You know what I mean? Gravity is actually quite weak, except that out here it works on everything. And you get down to the fundamental van der Waals forces and stuff, and that's what's making an atom work. But there's similarities that give us predictive power over what happens real big and what happens real small, and that leads to that college, like, you mean in my fingernail there's a whole universe of atoms? But it really is. It's similar enough that you can kind of like get a feel for what that's like, because on the big and on the small, it's just a matter of scale, not a matter of difference.
Right.
I know I, like I said, apologize to all the really smart astrophysicists and people that really know this stuff as to how I just butchered things. But that's what I've been able to accumulate for reading Hawkins books and reading, Brian Greene and whoever else, because I kind of want to know. I kind of want to be able to, even in that rarefied atmosphere, stand there and ask a question and not have it be that all of a sudden I have a little clown hat on because I'm such an idiot. You know what I mean?
Right. So there was a report I just saw that they just proved one more thing from Einstein's theories that they'd never proved before. I didn't read the whole thing. I'll look it up again. I'll try and get a link. But basically, they were observing a black hole, and there was something happening. They're like, okay, this is going to happen. They got it. Yes, we know, blah, blah, blah. But then they saw some flashes of light that they couldn't explain. They're like, where is that coming from? Well, here it turns out it was the light that entered, didn't go all the way in. It bent the light and ejected it back out. And they're like, we've never seen it. We just proved that light bends and, affects it this way. It's never happened before. I was like, oh my gosh, it's 2021 and we're still proving this stuff from Einstein from 150 years ago.
Yeah. One of the things that I love reading about is a lot of what has blinded us up until now is we only had instrumentation to a certain level. Mm-hmm. So Einstein thought, gravity is a force. Most forces have to have a way in which they interact with the environment. So there should be gravity waves, just like there are magnetic waves or light waves or whatever else it might be. Well, gravity waves are so small in their effect that in order to be able to detect them, you really have to be able to, like this grain of sand on a huge beach, we can look at how it moved slightly because of a difference in gravity, etc. And they finally, as you might have read, within the last 10 years, I think, did the experiment that said, we have instrumentation that can say at this place on the planet and this place on the planet, if it shifts more than this amount, there's no other force that could account for it except for a gravity wave having hit it. And they only, again, boy, I wish I was better at this. I'm butchering. They set up an experiment that would prove the existence of gravity waves, and you start to get into that weird Heisenberg place of the act of observing it actually changes the situation. So how do we set up our instrumentation so that the act of observing it isn't the effect that we're looking for?
Right.
That we've taken everything out except what must remain is a shift if it moves. And that's a lot of how they seem to be doing things. It's kind of inductive versus deductive. What do we know, and then what can we prove with it? Or what do we know is not there, and yet there's still something there? So what can we interpret that to be? And I just love the minds that can come up with the thought experiment that starts that says, well, on what scale would I have to be able to detect gravity? Oh, 2 observing posts the entire world away. If we can make that, this is on bedrock, it's solid, there's no solar, there's no change in heat, it's in a vacuum, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
They said, what would be the conditions? And then someone said, I think I could build that, and then away they went. And so I'm still in awe of people. I'm not sure, there's a lot of poo-pooing of those kinds of things, because, well, what good's that going to be? It doesn't help me drive my car better. And yet, what is there more than man? The first time he looked up at the sky and said, what are those things? Are they, spirits? Are they
Right.
hooked in a piece of cardboard? We always want to know more and understand further. And there really are things that we learn as humanity. No matter what we've learned, it has some applicability.
Yeah.
It's not the thing we've learned, it's how did we pursue the finding out of the problem? How do we get it so that we had instrumentation that could read that fine? And maybe that instrumentation is going to be used to say,
Yes.
This is how a cancer cell works. That's what
I was going to say.
What I mean? There's spin-off benefits, as they used to talk about the NASA and the space programs, that it isn't only about getting to the moon, it's that we learn space food sticks, we learn
Dehydration,
Wi-Fi, and all kinds of the communications things and the surviving in hostile environments things and what the human body does in those conditions. Tons of stuff that we learned went on to change the world, not just getting to the moon.
The thing that people forget, and people that would say, well, it doesn't help my car, blah, blah, blah. Okay, here's the problem, that there are things we don't know about as a species. And obviously the person saying something stupid like that doesn't know about things. There are some things we just don't know. If you don't know about it, you can't ask questions about it. We don't even know what we don't know. That old saying, is that walking into physics the first day in high school, and the teacher goes, so what questions do you have about physics? Yeah, what the hell's physics? You got to have some knowledge first. So all of this builds, yes, maybe gravity waves and putting this experiment won't progress helping cancer cells or your car running better. But we don't even know, because right. And this goes back, one of the other things I've been doing, I told you about, was working with Gina and Colin and a friend of ours doing cryptids and investigations and ghost hunts and things like that.
Okay.
And the 4 of us have completely different viewpoints, and Colin's our skeptic. Like everything, he's like, no, it does just not at all. And I'm always pushing back with, but we just don't know enough. We don't know, okay, maybe that wasn't a ghost. Maybe Gina saw it was chemicals in her head. Either way, we don't know what it is. We don't know she did or didn't. We don't know, but we have to. And he's just like, well, it's not a ghost. So, but we don't know that it's not, because we don't know what ghosts are.
It's the pursuit of finding out.
Yes.
That has so much value in and of itself. You know
what
I mean?
And until we have enough technology and enough science and enough knowledge of what we now term as paranormal, we can't even ask questions. We don't even have enough information right now for that.
That's it's kind of funny. Of course, I have to run my life with, the scale at which I operate has a certain number of things that are pretty constant. You know what I mean? I haven't run into that many things that were miraculous, that were like without explanation. And so that's still how I have to run my life, is the extrapolation of what usually works.
Right.
And yet what I know I love being surprised. And because I've gotten good at taking data, being able to extrapolate into the future, get to what's probably going to be done, said, etc. I love it when I guess I got more to learn, or I got to get better data, or it's just there's inherent randomness in some systems, noise in the data, or my ability to perceive it, that it's just, I will never be able to predict this. And sometimes I want to be in that situation and others not. You know what I mean? When I want to go
Right.
into a conversation, not know what people are going to talk about, that's wonderful. I don't want to be saying, what do I know about avalanches? Well, if I think it's going to avalanche while I'm driving on this road, I don't need to have the proof kill me. You know what I mean? So
Right.
it's a little bit of how, like, again, how people run their lives, what they do with themselves. I really love to hear just the first time that a child talks about how would they figure that out if they wanted to, that it's not just I learned it from a book, or that some people are, you want to have a combination of experiential, that they learned it for themselves. Sometimes it really is, well, I didn't have to do a dangerous thing. I could read about what it's like to be underwater, and that as you go down, I've had experience with just the pool, that you get more pressure and it makes your ear pop. Well, then imagine that being 100 feet down and that your ears can't pop anymore. So what do you do to protect yourself from that imbalance and pressure? And just, you can see who can kind of put those things together. And sometimes where they just go, it's magic. It's,
Yeah.
you know what I mean? They don't have that spirit of, I really want to understand this. They go with kind of the easy explanation, and the easy is often wrong. They go with the, I don't know, we all have things that we short circuit the reasoning part to just be able to quickly get to a conclusion, because you have to every day. You have to just not look at your environment new. You have to have some assumptions about, this is how trees work and this is how people work and all that
Right.
kind of stuff.
My pushback with Colin is things like sharks scenting blood in the water. They still don't understand how that works, because they've done experiments where, okay, no sharks around. They put 1 or 2 drops in. Within minutes, there are sharks coming that have swum 3 miles. There's no way 2 drops of blood dispersed
spread through that medium. Exactly.
Yes. Just last year or the year before, they discovered a new organ in our body. Now, it's not a pancreas or anything big like that. It was a collection of certain kind of cells and nerves that did a minor little thing, but they're like, this is a complete organ. This is new. We've never known about it. So I mean, things like that. If this is happening now, the thing with the black hole in the light, they've never proven it. Now they have. Yeah. If these things are happening in 2020 and 2021, then what else don't we know? What else will we prove 300 years from? That's my pushback with him always. And then he always replies with, well, you can't use that as a basis to prove that you're right. I'm not using it to prove that I'm right.
Just to leave that little opening of there's still more to learn.
I'm using it to say that it's not necessarily non-existent, or that it's wrong, that there's still something.
So if I know that they just discovered that birds have some way of being able to sense the magnetic field of the world, so that's how they migrate. It's been a long, if you will, a mystery. They're able to do it. They get all the way from Greenland down to South America or whatever else it might be, and with regularity. And it doesn't need to be based on, they look at it, they judge air currents. There really was. So having said that, now that we know that they have some sensory apparatus, an organ or whatever else it might be, it kind of can be used to explain. I know people that have a really good sense of direction and others that don't. And, not only in the way of what we talked about, hey, as long as I keep the mountain on my left, I know on a map that this is where I am. But there's sometimes where I kind of have that. I never feel lost. I almost always have some sense of where I am, where north, south. And of course, some of it is just the, what would you call it? You're always aware of where the sun is. And so you can always kind of judge north, south, east, west. But it's a little bit more and different than that maybe it's memory. Almost any place I've ever been, I can kind of get back to it. And so I have, but even accounting for all of that stuff, there have been times where this just feels like the right way. I don't know why, but this feels like the right way to go. And then we end up back where we wanted to go on a series of trails that could have gone really good or really bad. And once in a while it's a guess and it's really bad. And you got to remember that you had as many failures as you did positives. But if you're positive 90% of the time, that seems to be like a nice, there's something going on there. It's not 50-50. It's not 60-40. It really is.
Yeah.
I after a while, I realize I'm pretty good at it. So you don't have cockiness about it. We have a little bit of confidence for, well, let me make a guess. Let's just try this. And then as you go that way, and it's like, now this starts to look familiar. Yeah, I've really been amazingly benefited with. I guess I got a little magnetic thing going on, or I got a little bit of whatever the gestalt is of anywhere I've ever been. I can kind of relate to. This looks a little bit like that, and so let's guess that it's this way. My father had it too. I don't know if my brothers do. I think like they have different things. My older brother has the sense of his body in space. He's a pilot, and he's never unaware of where he is 3D, so he can do the fighter pilot cool stuff. And
it's partly skill, and experience.
Yeah, but even just that thing of that you don't even have the fear of it in the first place, that whenever the first time you try it, instead of feeling disoriented, you were like, oh, it's just, of course I knew. It's like, it's kind of cool to hear that of course part, because it, in the act of that unnerving to many people thing, he's one of the guys that doesn't seem to have that at all. And I'm admiring of that. You know what I mean? That people don't usually find themselves in the air, kind of weightless, shifting around. And you might get that in a video game, like if you play Portal, you immediately have to worry about orientation and what the hell's going on. And some people just immediately take to it, and others are like, I've played this 20 times and I can't figure it out. Right. So there's a gradation there, a spectrum of familiarity with the whole concept of it, or something like that.
And what I bring up with Colin is what you just said. Some people just have different skills, the way their brain works. I mean, there's so many combinations of people. And I said, okay, there's so many chemicals in our body, so many ways that the nerves run and the stuff. So just for a moment, let's say that in Gina, her nerves and her chemical makeup is in such a way that her brain sees light slightly shifted higher than what we're seeing because light's a huge spectrum. We see this much. Right. Maybe there is some sort of energy in a light spectrum that we can't normally see that she is. Or if there are multiple universes, and I said this, NASA has said there are other universes, pocket universes. We don't know anything about them. We can't do anything but detect that, yes, they exist. Okay, so we don't know anything about them, but they exist. So that's new. What's to say that there's not something in somebody's makeup that is more tuned to some of these? So it's
the alternatives that they get. I wonder.
You can't say, oh no, that doesn't exist, when we don't know enough about it to make it one way or the other.
I can't believe I'm going to go on record about this. I'm really a skeptic. I really am much embracive of science, and that we'll get to the explanation by further study and instrumentation and all that kind of stuff. And what humbles me about that and leaves room is I have this weird thing that I can sense animals sometimes.
Oh.
We'll be going down the street and it'll be like, there's a cat up ahead. And I couldn't tell you how I know that. It's not like I hear in my voice, I'm a cat. It's nothing weird like that. But then again, kind of that weird 90%, there will indeed be the cat in the window where I thought it was going to be. And we'll be out hiking. And it'll be there, and I wish I had all the words to put to this. Animals have different things so that you can sense, is it a bird, which is kind of like flittery? It's not a predator versus prey, that they're sharper versus duller, that I have had many weird times where we're like gonna go around a corner and there's something big around this corner, and that's when we see the bison that you really shouldn't get close to, or something like that. And I'm sure that I've had a number of times where I also was, oh, I think there's an orangutan here, and of course there's not. But I've said it enough times to Colleen that she's like, I'm not trying to weird her out, but it's more like, I kind of don't want to keep this to myself. It's this weird little thing. Honestly, Stephen, there's no special magic rays that come out of animals that go into animal head. There's no, I can talk to the animals, Dr. Doolittle. There's no explanation for this weirdness, except that instead of it just being random, it seems to be, I'll go away from 90. It's more than 5149. I'm so often right that it's just, well, how cool is that?
Right. And my thing, is, because I think that's super cool, and I think everybody has something somewhere like that. But right now in 2021, it sounds like it's paranormal. It sounds otherworldly. But maybe in 100, 500, 1,000 years, there will be changes in our science and understanding that it's explainable, that it may even be a partial other sense that we all have. And some people just have more of it and it's developing now. Or, there could be a million possibilities. I'm not saying they are, but I'm also not saying it's definitely paranormal,
What I've tried to relate it to is, we know that some people are better, like with horses. They're a
Yeah.
horse whisperer. And so in whatever way they move and present themselves and speak, it's calming, or it's being part of the herd, or it's even being the alpha of the herd. And so I'm good with animals. Most cats and dogs really seem to like me for no good reason. I'm just a guy. And yet I have a calmness about me, or there's something about, I also know, unfortunately, that if you were to like, okay, we're going to do a double blind study that says for all the times that Al says, is there really something there? I have no confidence that it would work. There's no way that I'd be in a controlled lab environment and that I'd be able to prove that I have this thing.
Right.
So I kind of don't want to be the psychic detective that finds the clues, because et cetera, et cetera. I don't trust this ability at all. It is a happenstance and kind of well, that was cute and amusing that I knew there was a turkey there or something like that. But I, you know what I mean? I just, like I said, it's humbling to be skeptic, and yet I got this little weirdness.
Yeah.
What's that all about?
Well, there's
just...
there's a lot of wonder still in the universe. Don't lose the wonder. With all the science, all the big brain thinking stuff, there's still wonder that you can
some
enjoy.
Part of what I deal with animals, I'm not just like, how you doing, buddy, and talking to them. There's something where I think I'm trying to project, we're pack, I'm your friend. You know what I mean? Let's go for a run together or something like that. And it's, like I said, there's no magic rays. There's nothing that's going on like that. But I think what's more would account for it would be, especially dogs and cats, they're very sensitive to people and their faces and their voice tone and that kind of stuff. But wild animals, I have no idea how I would know. And like once in a while, it's so specific that it's weird. Like there's a bird, and I think it's more like an owl than a pigeon. You know what I mean? There's like a different, because owls are quiet and they're calm and they're really good at what they do. They don't have to do 1,000 tries. They can pick out the one thing they want to get, and all that, who knows why, but that's I can't even say image. The impression that I get in my head is there's a really efficient predator coming up, but it's not danger to us. It's not a cougar, but it just is, there's like,
it could be a skunk.
I gotta shut up. Because I feel like a fool now, like I said, this is on tape. I can't believe I just,
on tape. How old are you?
Wacky. It's just,
I'll just call you Dr. Doolittle. but that's the thing though. Again, we look at it as something otherworldly, paranormal, but it could totally be. There could be a million people right now with the exact same thing, but because it's not a provable science, it's not something we know a lot about.
When I strive for explanations, it really is, well, we all got 5 senses, but people are different in the strength of them, the quality of them. So I know, like, maybe I smell the animal nearby and I can't put I don't have a dog nose where it's 40,000 times more accurate and that kind of thing. But I know that people have different noses where they react to various different things. Some have that perfect perfumer nose where they really can tell incredible differences in, this is ocelot scent versus this is fox scent. And you know what I mean? Like,
and it might be subconscious.
And that's what I think, is that in the face of, I don't know what to make of it, some part of my brain is saying, but it is something. And then it just starts saying, maybe that's an animal that that animal is not enough in your environment that you have that scent. When we all smell skunk, we know skunk. And so that's what it is. I don't know what a fox smells like, but because it's kind of like other dog-ish, it's got fur, whatever the scent things are that come from, it's got musk glands, it has a little bit of meat about it because it just killed and ate something. All of that, whatever that is, that my not so mighty nose, but my mind is playing with. Maybe I saw a branch move and it was indicative of the way it looks like when a bird is sitting on the branch. So even if it's in the middle of a tree and you can't really see, you had to make some sense out of that. Wasn't the wind, it was something else. And so I talked myself out of, you really, you did sense it. You just didn't have the direct 5 cents plus umami, just teasing, sweet sugar, salt, bitter, and umami. I think that there's something going on there that I can't fully explain.
That all makes sense. It could definitely be a combination of things. Mm-hmm. Of course, none of that explains how when you're driving down the car and there's a cat in a window up ahead.
And see, that's you're exactly right. When I've tried to follow that through to the logical conclusion, it's like, but if you're in a box where all those things are cut off and it's night, so it's not light and it's not smell and it's not sound, you didn't hear a mew from inside a car. Right. Who knows? Right. I wish it's kind of cool.
I agree. That is very cool. Well, I'm going to have to get going. I got some other things coming up, but I didn't get to it this week. So I know we want to work on it so we can talk to Catherine, but sometime I've got to talk. We got a soda stream to give.
Oh my, where you're making your own flavored things now. And
yes.
You're to be a mad scientist about
this.
Yes. I want to get some acai and tiger in a bottle.
So I'll have a report in an upcoming week and, some recipes and stuff we've tried to see what works, what doesn't, and stuff like that. So, all right, man.
Okay, we'll troubleshoot for next time. And as always, thanks for the chat. I really do appreciate it, Stephen. Okay.
Talk to you later. Have a good one.
You have been listening to the Relentless Geekery podcast. Come back next week and join Alan and Stephen's conversation on geek topics of the week.